This is Okradowski of WeAreChange.org, joined today by Dan Dix of PressForTruth.ca. It looks like you're in the North Pole, Santa next to you, very Christmassy. And if you remember, Dan Dix is a long-term friend of mine, also a fellow reporter who's been arrested with me at least 2 times, mostly covering the Bilderberg group meeting. Wherever they go, we go. And in this video, we will be talking about important developments up north with the Canucks. And the Canucks are going pretty crazy. In the United States, just a few weeks ago, if you remember, there was a very big national case about a 7-year-old in Texas and a court ruling that this kid must be transgendered. Well, recently, a judge ruled that a father does actually have a say in this, but I remember covering that case and remembering things in Canada are a little bit more crazier with similar situations happening, but a different outcome happening as well. And Dan Dix of Press for Truth was covering that important case. We're going to get into this as well. The latest moves by Justin Trudeau and also violent male convicts that are claiming to be trans that are terrorizing women in all female Canadian jails. Holy cow. I mean, you look at what's happening in Canada. Dan, it's crazy. How do you deal with it? And give us the 411 on this crazy social justice warrior thing. I don't know what else to call it. The thing that's happening up in Canada.
It's like a bizarre cultural Marxist revolution. It's really been a slow march through the institutions, as I've been calling it, through taking over the academia and things of that nature, where this thought process, this ideology has entered our society here in Canada to the point where they're now putting pen to paper, Luke, and putting pieces of legislation into law, like Bill 89, that would give the government the ability to take away a parent's child from them if they refuse to recognize the kid's preferred gender pronoun. And there's no age limit here, Luke. We're talking, you can be a little 4 or 5-year-old Billy who wants to be called Sally, or vice versa. And if your parents disagree with that, or they try to get you to think differently, that's going to be looked at as child abuse, and they'll be taking the kid away. So we're dealing with some crazy heavy stuff up here. I'm talking with this one father. We're going to blow this one in a huge exclusive PFT piece, but he's currently under gag order. So time will tell. But once that is lifted, we're going to explain exactly what's going on behind the scenes with that one. This is the father of a 14-year-old girl who is also being gagged, being arrested with something called family violence, just for trying to suggest that it's not healthy for his daughter to be transitioning. Absolutely brutal what's going on. And now we're seeing it in places like Texas with this poor little 7-year-old boy. Man, I feel bad for the father, Mr. Younger.
Yes, I mean, the court rulings are still in process right now. But again, it was a very disturbing case. But it first happened up in Canada, and you were covering it. You know the family, the details that you were able to just tell us, just even from, the basic things were just absolutely surprising. And I don't know how much you could get into it, but this seems more of the norm being pushed onto people when clearly there should be a bigger conversation. There should be a bigger debate, but people are actually being arrested in Canada, like this anti-feminist blogger who was offensive, who was saying things that weren't that nice, but this man is again being set to jail for having opinions that aren't nice, and that's crossing the line. That's absolute insanity. What else could you tell us about some of the court proceedings that you've been following in Canada, and essentially where all of this is going to? Because it's just absolutely insane, and it's all being done officially, written in supposed law, which is crazy.
Yeah, well, I sat in the court proceedings, and I heard the testimony, the video of this little girl who admits that this whole thing started when she was in, I think it was grade 6, she said, and she was shown a video at school that had a transgender character in the video. And she started thinking, hey, I want to cut my hair short like the girl did in that video. And these ideas kind of came through the school. She then went to the teacher and expressed these ideas, and the teacher suggested she go speak to a counselor, and the counselor suggested she speak to a doctor. All of this is happening unbeknownst to the parents, unbeknownst to the father, who's strictly against this stuff. By the time the dad found out, this has already gone through to the counselors, to the doctors. They're already making procedures to go ahead with the transition. And he's saying, hang on a second. So we're now finding out that it actually originated from the schools. So, I think this pretty much amounts to child abuse, Luke. It's absolutely ridiculous. And now we have the, there's something called conversion therapy as well that's been around for a long time, since the 20th century. And the Canadian government is now looking to ban the practice as a part of the criminal code as Justin Trudeau's new cabinet comes in.
How would you describe conversion therapy? Because I know there's a lot of controversy surrounding just that issue in itself. But again, having more laws here is a little bit troubling, because again, once you give government power over you, especially power over speech, it will be used against everyone. Right now, it's being used against some offensive people, some people who are saying things that are hurtful, but they're going to be turned around. Just like historically speaking, anytime a government gets more power, more rights, they always abuse it. Very, very few times in history has a government gained power and given it back to the people. So this is a very dangerous precedent. What are some of the details here that really stick out to you, especially with the latest move by Justin Trudeau and this kind of ban on conversion therapy? And again, try to explain things as simply as you can what conversion actually is.
Sure. Well, conversion therapy is simply this idea of turning a gay or bisexual person into a heterosexual person. And this is a very controversial concept because of some of the methods that have been used over the last couple of hundred years to do this. It's not something I necessarily support because, as I say, people have gotten crazy with this, down to the fact of doing literally lobotomies to try to, undo someone's gayness, which is obviously going way too far. But in this day and age, nobody's being forced into conversion therapy. If somebody is gay and they're feeling a conflict with their morality and they want to seek therapy for that and maybe get help and see if they can do something about it, they should have the option to be able to do that if they want to. The Canadian government wants to come in and stop that. But the real crux of the matter, the real crazy thing here, the real hypocrisy that I see here is that the Canadian government is actually for conversion therapy, but not for these gay men who want it. They're for it for these little trans kids who are telling their parents that they want to take, hormone blockers, puberty blockers, and testosterone and estrogen and stuff like that. They're encouraging that kind of conversion therapy. That's considered brave and progressive if you want to convert your child into another gender.
And also creates irreversible physical damage that can't be outdone from the child's adolescence. That's another big aspect here that needs to be talked about, because everyone wants to talk about how progressive and diverse they are, but in reality, there are some legitimate effects here that do deserve a conversation that will end up hurting people if you go too far in any of the aspects, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, we're going too far into this for YouTube's concerns, because according to their new terms of services, this is going to be considered bullying a certain protected class of people. So this is how bad it's getting. Not only is the Canadian government starting to, go protect this class, but YouTube is going to start silencing anybody who even questions this. And we're talking about, like, as you said, irreversible damage that is being done to children. And you know what? I don't know the exact stats, but I think it's in the high 90% of these children who, once they do go through puberty, they eventually realize that they are who they are and they accept the fact that they're the sex that they were born with. And that happens most of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you stand with me on this issue because, again, we're very kind of freedom-oriented individuals. Whatever a person wants to do, sure, do it. But when it comes to pain and suffering, this is not something we're for. We're not here trying to stop anyone from being whoever they want to be. We're not here trying to force or push an agenda onto somebody. We're here to talk about the rational, actual things that will happen, that do deserve a conversation, that there will be effects to, but a lot of this is just being silenced. And again, we're treading the line here. We're walking the fine line here on YouTube as well, which we got to be a little bit careful of. But again, this is too much of an important conversation to have that deserves it. And you again, had your whole channel demonetized because you refused to kind of bow down to this issue, which, I do give you some credence and respect for doing so, because that's a big, bold move that you had to make. And it's not an easy move for a lot of individuals.
Well, I have no problem with trans people whatsoever. I never have. My problem started when the Canadian government was going to force me. They were going to police my language and force me by law to refer to somebody as something that I know they are not. They just completely dispelling reality is not something I was willing to do. So I took a stand at that moment and said, no, enough is enough. This is ridiculous. Now we're charting into the territory of tyrannical governments dictating what we can think. So it's not about being against trans people. It's about being against a system that is allowing trans people to abuse children, for example.
Yeah, and pushing it on children more than ever, especially with the kind of entertainment industry just shoving it down people's throats. There's even books in libraries that are being found that are extremely graphic and sexual in nature, things that I can't describe here, that parents are finding books that are to children, to adolescents, that describe, one specific example that I found today, I can't go into detail. But it was about, child abuse of the worst sorts, the Jeffrey Epstein kind of child abuse. And there was a children's book in a child section that was promoted to help children understand LGBTQ, that was glorifying the abuse of children non-consensually as a child who supposedly was enjoying that. I can't get it. I'm trying to be as vague as I can here because it's extremely disturbing to get to this issue. But what do you think's going on here? Growing up, I just wanted to be a Power Ranger. Now kids are growing up and they're being inundated with so much bombardment of just progressive issues and causes and demands of people trying to set this. I'm having a hard time grasping the bigger idea of what's happening here. Do you have some sort of comprehension or understanding, since you're pretty much at ground zero of this in Canada?
Well, I think there's a serious attack on the family unit, not just in Canada, but in the West in general. And this has been happening incrementally over time, but that's what we're dealing with. And it's gotten to the point where, like you said, children today are being completely bombarded with this idea. I'm sure you're familiar now with this thing that's getting popular for some reason, of drag queens going around to kids reading sessions, and reading children's books to a bunch of kids. This is happening all over the place.
Dressed sexually to boost arousal. When you look at what these men kind of dress as, especially with the red lips, especially with the blush, especially with the high heels that make the buttocks look big, all of that is, again, so if you look at the whole nature of makeup, it is to entice sexual desire. That's predominantly what makeup is for. Having guys dress up to the largest possible extent as essentially strippers, like this is what they look like, let's just be honest here, and then bringing them into a child's classroom and being like, yes, it's okay to be a sexual object, to dress up and paint yourself as a sexual object to kids. No. And again, at the other time, I don't agree about pushing, all this other bull crap and punishing people for, playing with dolls if they're boys. I don't believe in any kind of bigger agenda to be pushed on these people, because children should just be freaking children. I don't know what's hard to understand about that, but I agree with you, because if you look at what's happening, a lot of this does boil down to attacking the family unit. Now, some people theorize that this is as a bigger kind of agenda to control people easily. And obviously, when people don't have families, they rely on the state, they rely on consumerism, they rely on a lot of things outside of their kind of unit, of their kind of family, of their kind of lineage for their kind of existence. And this is where a lot of forces gain their power. But essentially, do you think this boils down to kind of economic incentives, or do you think it's even more sinister, more top-down controlling of this bigger kind of agenda to destroy families that are becoming less and less common in our daily life? I mean, let's be honest, you look around, there's not that many families. There's a lot of single mothers. There's a lot of destruction of relationships. There's a lot of divide and conquer. There's a lot of hatred between men and women, but there's not a lot of families, right?
Yeah, well, I think it's multifaceted. I think it's economic. I think it's political, but I also think it's spiritual. Like there is a serious attack on the family unit because of the fact that the family unit represents a patriarchal government system, essentially, and the child comes first in the family governmental unit. And this is what's under attack because the government wants them to be the nanny state. They want a one world global government and everybody to rely on them. And when they can break away the family unit, people are more susceptible to going along with that. So I think that's what it's about. And on the grander, bigger picture of this, what some call a satanic agenda, it could fall into the population control idea that the elites have, and the idea that obviously if everyone's gay, we're not going to be able to have any babies anymore, unless it's all done artificially, which is obviously very unnatural and bizarre. So it could be about population control as well, but I honestly think it's more on the spiritual level of an agenda to do away with the family unit so that an eventual global government can eventually come forward.
Well, if they're doing it on the population control level, there definitely leaves a lot of questions, especially with India and China with their populations rising and the populations in the West kind of declining. But then again, you look at Jeffrey Epstein, you look at the most powerful kind of significant technocrats and supposed elites in our country. Jeffrey Epstein and a lot of them, they're population control eugenicists. They're enthusiasts of trying to reduce the world's population, as well as the royal family. That's another weird connection. For some strange reason, a lot of the royal family members believe in population reduction, just like their good old pal Jeffrey Epstein. But again, that doesn't seem to have a lot to do with the larger conversation that we're even hearing about. But there's a lot of different possibilities, but I want to leave it up to you, the audience. Why do you think this is happening? And essentially, what are your theories about the chaos, the craziness, the wild stuff that we're seeing in this world? I mean, for frick's sakes, there's violent male convicts that are terrorizing women in all-female jails. And they're doing all of this in the name of inclusion, in the name of diversity, in the name of social justice warrior. I mean, look, how is this possible that this could be happening in our country and enforced by the government that is using the threat of force and the threat of putting you in jail or killing you if you don't go along with this? Well, guess what? We're not going along with this, and we need to speak out against this. Dan, thank you so much for speaking out about this. Where can people find out more information about you? And I kind of want to leave you here with the last word.
Yeah, for sure. People can get it info from me at pressfortruth.ca/donate. I'm on YouTube at Press for Truth if you search that for now. Anyways, if you go to one of my YouTube videos in the description, you'll see links to all the other alternative platforms that I'm on, which I highly encourage people to do, because as more of these conversations come to YouTube, the more YouTube's going to clamp down on these types of conversations, and we're going to go have them elsewhere. So we hope you guys can join us there. But I guess, the major takeaway from this today is that we got to do this. I don't want to sound too cliche, but it's for the children. I mean, they're literally attacking little children, pre-puberty children, and physically castrating them. This is absolute insanity, and it needs to stop. So I would encourage people to support people like Mr. Younger, like the other families, so I'm sure are going to come up in subsequent cases that are going to follow. A lot of similar ones are going to come up. Let's support these people. let's show them that there is people out there who do care and who do feel the same way you do. Don't worry about the PC police. It's okay to have these feelings because, that's the broader conversation that I think is important to have.
Yep, and people still need to realize that Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself. Ghislaine Maxwell is out free running around with Prince Andrew, Pinocchio Prince, as of course the federal government, the state government, the police authorities have failed and allowed the abuse of over 1,000+ children with the Jeffrey Epstein case. And there's probably a lot more cases that we don't know about, but we're going to be fighting to uncover that here on YouTube while me and Dan are still somehow, luckily, here. And again, Dan, definitely thank you so much for coming on, for being brave to speak about these issues. That's why we're having you on our show. That's why we also recommend you definitely also sign up to our email list, just in case the day comes where we get the axe. We get the axe in many different ways. Downranking, demonetizing, but until we get the official axe, we're still here. We're still happy to be a part of the conversations. I look forward to your feedback, and thank you so much for supporting and watching independent media. Love you guys. Stay tuned for more here on wearechange.org.